doubling down on his defense of those Covington High School students in the wake of that viral video. As we learn, classes were canceled at the school today over security and safety concerns. Good morning, everyone. I'm Sandra Smith, live inside America's Newsroom.
And good morning, Sandra.
Good morning.
Good to be with you. Good morning, everyone. I'm Eric Shawn in for Bill Hemmer this morning. The president this morning is tweeting about this controversy, calling it what he says is a, quote, smear campaign by the mainstream media. And we're now hearing from the students themselves for the very first time.
Several media platforms blatantly lied about the events regarding the controversy in D.C., and it has affected us as a community and individuals greatly. There have been many threats against our lives, against our parents. Some of these threats include that we should all be locked in the school and it should be burnt to the ground, the school being bombed.
Meanwhile, there is new reaction to that BuzzFeed report as we learn the president's legal team reached out to the special counsel after it was published. We have live Fox team coverage for you this morning. Congressman Peter King will join us in just a moment. Kevin Corke is at the White House, but we begin with Doug McKelway in Covington, Kentucky. Doug, there's been talk of lawsuits. Can you verify that?
Yes, I can, and we'll have more on that in just a sec, but I wanted to set the scene right here for what's going on this morning and what we expect to happen. There's been talk of a protest by Native American groups outside the Diocese of Covington, where we now stand. We haven't been able to verify that. Also talk of a protest by Antifa. Haven't been able to verify that. It's supposed to happen at 10 o'clock this morning. We'll keep our eyes open. But seldom has the overwhelming thrust of so many media narratives been as one-sided as we have seen in this story. Let me just take one tweet, for example, and show you what's happened with that. This is a tweet that says, "It isn't about border security, it is about white supremacy. Prayers for Nathan Phillips." He's the Native American elder who was seen banging his drum. "And the teens taught hate." Well, responding to that tweet, a Los Angeles attorney by the name of Robert Barnes tweeted, "This is a libelous lie. Retract or get sued." Hours after that mainstream media narrative was established, alternative videos, though, began springing up, conveying an entirely different narrative. That the Covington teens, some of whom wore MAGA hats, were themselves being taunted by a group of African-American youth called the Black Israelites. Then enters Native American Nathan Phillips, who approaches the group within inches of one student, Nick Sandman's face. Sandman, as you can see, does not move, does not react in any way. Some have accused him of smirking. He said in a statement yesterday, "I believe that by remaining motionless, I was helping to diffuse the situation. I realized everyone had cameras and that perhaps a group of adults was trying to provoke a group of teenagers into a larger conflict." Now, people have asked, where were the chaperones? Well, the chaperones were right in the midst of the kids. One of them told the Cincinnati Enquirer this morning there was nothing the chaperones could have done differently. "I'm very proud of the way the boys behaved in this situation." It wasn't until the boys returned to Covington, Kentucky, that they realized they had become a major national news story. And as you said, the school has been closed for today because of some threats, very, very vile threats indeed, that are coming their way.
Yeah, so school closed today. We'll see. Doug, we hear also that the Kentucky congressional delegation is getting involved.
They are in a variety of ways. Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky tweeted several tweets about the situation. One of them said, "Unfortunately, there's too often a rush to judgment in our media. We should stop. All look at the facts first." Tom Massey, who is the Republican congressman representing this district, has been very much involved and promises to be more involved, has come to the students' defense. President Trump also tweeting, "Looking like Nick Sandman and the Covington Catholic students were treated unfairly with early judgments proving to be false, smeared by the media, not good, but making a big comeback." This story is not at all over. I talked about the potential for lawsuits and protests, so we'll keep our eyes open and keep you informed.
Doug McKelway in Covington, thank you.
And now back to that controversial BuzzFeed report. Rudy Giuliani now saying the Trump legal team did speak with special counsel's office about that story and agreed that, yes, it was inaccurate. A ranking House Intelligence Committee member, Republican Devin Nunes, sounding off about all this and the media frenzy.
BuzzFeed, along with dozens and dozens of actors of news media people, have staked their entire careers on this Russian gambit. And so they are desperate. So every week we have something new, something comes up that this is the end-all be-all. And it just so happens that last week BuzzFeed, I think was looking for a Hail Mary pass and it just didn't work.
And Kevin Corke is live at the North Lawn at the White House, where he always is. Kevin, I mean, is it fair to say this morning that Rudy Giuliani really has some explaining to do? I mean, with the timeline he laid out and claimed about the president's conversations with Michael Cohen that he then said was hypothetical, and dealing with the Mueller team.
Yeah, spot on. And listen, let me just call it this. This is modified message management. But in a town and in a subject, Eric, that really requires message discipline, I think it's fair to say this is an unnecessary distraction for the president's legal team, to say the least. Still, understand how we get to a situation like this. The president's attorney has been in touch with the Mueller team, trying to clear up those loose ends on statements that he's made about the president's conversations with his former fixer, Michael Cohen. Giuliani, as you know, Eric, is a very strong defender of his client, but when it comes to the Mueller probe, he has on occasion had to clarify or walk back comments, because it's clear to know this. Any missteps could, at least in theory, be used against his client. The latest clarification having to do with those conversations, he said this: President Trump had several conversations with Michael Cohen about Trump Tower proposal. Cohen said the effort ended in January 2016. As far as the president knows, it ended then. But Giuliani also added that the president couldn't say definitively when it ended because he didn't know. He later said this, an answer to the president, or make that an answer that the president gave to Robert Mueller regarding the Trump Tower project, doesn't say when it ended, again, because we didn't know when it ended. He added that the scope of the questions that Mueller's team wanted answers to went to the end of 2016, but that doesn't mean the Trump Tower proposal goes until then. Again, this is very important because it speaks to the idea that you don't want inconsistencies in what you're saying publicly and what was said perhaps under oath or in answer to questions given by the Mueller team. It is also important to point out, Eric, this project never went forward.
Yep, they did talk about it, but it never did happen. Meanwhile, in terms of legislation and trying to get the government back open because of the shutdown on Capitol Hill today, there is some opportunity. The Senate begins that potential process to vote this week. How can that help?
Well, listen, what they really want to do here is apply the pressure on Democrats, right? Get them on the record and maybe, just maybe, get some of them to peel off and away from the Democratic leadership and hopefully come to some sort of an understanding, maybe begin to negotiate. As you know, the Democrats say they simply won't do that until the government is, in fact, reopened. Let me share a statement from the Appropriations Committee. Very interesting statement, again, sort of imploring Democrats, their colleagues across the aisle, to come to the table to at least try to negotiate an end to this government shutdown, which, as you know, is now north of a month old. This from Richard Shelby of Alabama. He said the president has proposed a serious compromise to end the shutdown. And as you see there, he goes on to say he also provides immigration reforms that Democrats have long supported. That is a very important part of that statement. He goes on to say, for the good of the country, I encourage my colleagues to either join us in passing this legislation or come to the negotiation table with constructive solutions of their own. Saying no to everything will not move our country forward. But as you know, Democrats like Chuck Schumer say the wall is simply not who we are as a nation, and funding it would be inconsistent with our values.
We are aghast that he wants this giant 30-foot wall to be the symbol of America. I tell President Trump, I've told him to his face, we want the symbol of America to remain the Statue of Liberty, freedom, equality, not a divisive wall. And we will fight for that. Fight for that, we will.
Schumer and a great number of other Democrats have actually voted for border security, including a barrier in the past, but not this time under President Trump, at least not yet. Eric?
Yeah, back in 2006, they voted for 2/3 more of a barrier.
That's right.
We'll be delving into this through the next 3 hours. Thank you, Kevin.
All right, for more on all this, let's bring in Congressman Pete King, who serves on the Intelligence Committee. Congressman, welcome, and thank you for your time this morning. So you were listening to all of that, and I just wonder, with the House and the Senate back at it today, what you think is going to come from this?
First of all, I fully agree that the president has made very reasonable compromises here. If the Democrats are serious, they will come to the table. I guess what I would hope for right now is that Mitch McConnell can move this in the Senate, at least start a debate, try to bring Democrats over, ideally pass it in the Senate, then have it sent to the House. Nancy Pelosi will, I'm sure, pass a different bill, but at least then a real set of negotiations can begin. And basically, everything Democrats have asked for in the past is being given at least somewhat. And as far as Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi being morally opposed to a wall, or this is not the symbol of the country, Barack Obama built 130 miles of wall. And so I guess by their logic, we should go and tear down all the wall that's along the southern border now, the wall in San Diego. I mean, this is ridiculous. And it really is shameful for the 800,000 people that are out of work. I was against the shutdown from the start. because I didn't see an exit strategy. But we are where we are. And the president, to me, has been extremely reasonable. And I think the Democrats, while they may feel they're still ahead in the polls, they're overplaying their hand. It's going to blow up in their faces. This is a chance for everyone to do what's right for the country.
So if Mitch McConnell is expected to take up the president's latest proposal in the Senate today, and I say that as a big if still, it makes its way to the House, what happens there?
I think what that would mean is that I'm sure Nancy Pelosi will pass a different bill in the House. But that could force a conference between the two sides. It would give both sides the cover they need to get this over and done with. The president, again, is being, of all the people involved, he's being the most reasonable here. And I think that's important. I think the American people are going to realize that more and more, that he's asking for basically not a large amount of wall at all. He's going to be given status to the Dreamers, to the TPS people. He's going to provide all the other technology that's needed, more Border Patrol agents, more immigration judges to increase the rate on the asylum cases. All of this, to me, this is a comprehensive plan, and the Democrats should go with it. Or if they want to make changes, fine. Put that on the table.
So, and there's a couple other topics I want to get to here. It's been a busy Tuesday morning so far. What you just heard as far as the exchange that occurred prior to the special counsel coming out and debunking that BuzzFeed report, that there was interaction with the president's legal team and Rudy Giuliani talking a bit about that. What did you make of what we learned there and what they were able to share with the special counsel's office?
Yeah, Rudy, first of all, is an expert federal counsel. I mean, he has a lifetime of experience in this field. And there are always backroom or backstage negotiations going on between the defense team and the prosecutors. So I think what Giuliani is doing, Rudy is putting the president's case forward to them. And I think the fact that if it's true, and he says it was, he went to them about the BuzzFeed story, that would be part of these backstage negotiations that go on in contact that does exist between prosecutors and defense counsel. And again, the BuzzFeed story was absolutely disgraceful, the way people ran with it. I mean, even looking at it on his face, it didn't add up. But who knows, it could have been true. And I think maybe there must be something here, but there was nothing at all. It was a total lie. And that, to me, is indicative of what's happened throughout this entire proceeding.
Congressman Pete King, always great to get your take on things as we start off the morning. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, we're going to have a lot more on this coming up. White House Deputy Press Secretary Hogan Gidley will be joining us to weigh in on all of these topics and more at 9:30 a.m. Eastern Time. Join us for that.
And, Sandra, right after the White House reaction, we will talk to Democratic Congressman Dan Kildee of Michigan about whether leaders of his party will be able to willing to accept any compromise that comes from the White House.
Plus, breaking news on the push to denuclearize North Korea. A new report claims the country has more than a dozen undeclared ballistic missile bases. How will that impact a second summit with the United States? General Jack Keane will join us on that next.
Kim Jong-un is looking very forward to it, and so am I. We've made a lot of progress that has not been reported by the media, but we have made a lot of progress as far as denuclearization is concerned.
Well, there's a stunning new report on a secret ballistic missile base in North Korea. That report from a Washington think tank. It also claims that as many as 20 undeclared missile bases are in that country. This as reports say the U.S. has told North Korea to freeze its nuclear program pending the president's upcoming summit with Kim Jong-un. So what does all this mean? General Jack Keane joins us, chairman of the Institute for the Study of War and a Fox News senior strategic analyst. General, hidden sights. Surprise, surprise, gee whiz.
Well, first of all, no surprise that North Korea is going to hide things. Secondly, I'm absolutely confident. While I know the think tank's very proud of their analysis of available public imagery, all of our intelligence services are very much aware of this site, as well as many other sites that are not disclosed.
So we have basically the finger on their nuclear program. Do you think that anything concrete can be achieved from the upcoming summit and the talks?
Well, I want to take the president at his word. He's saying a couple of things to us. One, he's in personal communication by letter with Kim Jong-un, and those around him have said the letters have been surprisingly sincere. And we haven't read them, so we can't comment on the actual facts of it. The second thing he has said is that there's more going on than what's being reported in the media. I have been saying for some time that one of the the real issues is that the North Koreans have never given us, from the first meeting we had with them, an inventory of all of their sites, nuclear and ballistic missile sites, and therefore put together a program or a timetable to dismantle and disarm those sites with inspectors from independent inspectors to be able to see.
And in the absence of that, does that show insincerity that they're again trying to pull the wool over our eyes like they did in previous administrations?
That leads to that speculation, and it's led me to that speculation. But I'm hoping that the president has that information now, or at least it was a predicate maybe for having the summit, and we can actually make some progress. Where we are, though, and it's undeniable, the North Koreans have not given up a single ballistic missile or a single nuclear or chemical biological weapon. That is where we are.
Say that again, because they have not agreed to any international inspections. They have not agreed to opening up any of these sites. They have not agreed to giving anything up, let alone tell us where everything is.
Well, what they have done is they've stopped nuclear and ballistic testing. So the crisis with missiles flying over Japan and flying towards Guam, that has been removed, to be sure. The second thing is really at issue. We know for a fact when North Koreans come to the summit with the president, they'll put something on the table. Hopefully it's tangible. And they will want in return a few things.
What would you like to see?
Well, I don't want to see us give up sanction relief because I think that's what brought them to the table. And that's what we have always given up, Eric, in the past in these negotiations. And then they've never fulfilled their promise to deliver what they put on the table. That has been the pattern of behavior. Hopefully this is different. I do think that Kim Jong-un is different than his father and his grandfather. I think he wants to change the economic situation in this country. He wants to open it up to the world a little bit more than what the Kim dynasty has done. But here's the other thing. I think he wants to hold on to many of his nuclear weapons also. He wants to be a nuclear power.
And finally, the Pentagon says that they remain an extraordinary threat. Do you agree?
Oh, yeah, of course. This is a country with nuclear weapons and ballistic missiles and has threatened the use of them.
All right, General Jack Keane, always good to see you. We'll see what comes out of the summit.
Good talking, Eric.
Thank you, of course. Sandra?
Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez facing some sharp reaction after saying an economic system that allows billionaires is immoral. Maria Bartiromo will be joining us live from Davos next.
I think that it's wrong that a vast majority of the country does not make a living wage. I think it's wrong that you can work 100 hours and not feed your kids.
Procession of first responders escorted Officer Sean Tudor from the medical examiner's office to a funeral home. The 30-year-old officer will be laid to rest later this week. Officer Tudor was shot and killed on Sunday while he was trying to make an arrest. Police say a 19-year-old suspect is now in custody in his killing. Tudor happens to be the second
of her plan to increase the top marginal tax rate in this country to 70%.
I do think a system that allows billionaires to exist when there are parts of Alabama where people are still getting ringworm because they don't have access to public health is wrong.
Maria Bartiromo joins us from the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. Maria, looks beautiful out there. And I know that this is a gathering of some of the richest people in the world right there in Davos. How do comments like that go over?
Well, I think you make a good point because you've got a lot of wealth here. But the truth is people look at that and say, what is that going to do to the economy if you make it so economically difficult for the highest earners? Let me just point out that according to the Tax Foundation, the top 10% of earners already pay almost 80% of all taxes. So you already have the highest earners paying their fair share, if you will. But, you know, this comment reminds me of something that Mayor de Blasio said about a week ago, and that was he told the gathering, look, there's a lot of money in this city. It's just in the wrong hands. Well, what exactly is the wrong hands? Is the wrong hands Ken Langone, the billionaire who just gave $100 million to NYU Medical School so that NYU could give out free medical school educations? Or maybe it's in Steve Schwarzman's hands, who just gave hundreds of millions of dollars to the New York Public Library so that people could have access to new technology in the library. Or maybe it's someone like David Koch or someone who else who has given so much to medical schools. Hank Greenberg having given hundreds of millions of dollars to New York Presbyterian. So you have to wonder what those billionaires would do with their money if the first thing they have to do is give 70% of it to the government. And let's talk about productivity for a second, a whole nother conversation. Are you going to really work incredibly hard with the belief that you could earn great success and you could get better and more wealth? And are you going to work really hard if you know that at a point you'll have to give it all to the government? Yeah. I don't think so. Well, so those comments, to me, seem quite naive.
She said that when asked whether a world that allows for billionaires is a moral outcome, she responded, no, it's not. She did take exception with some billionaires, like Bill Gates, for example, or Warren Buffett. She did not say that they are immoral. Likely that might come up a couple times out there at the Economic Forum. We'll see. But meanwhile, what's the discussion? What's the tone out there? Obviously, the global economy is a huge conversation. China and a trade deal getting done. What are they talking about?
Yeah, for sure. Those are the two big subjects right now, along with technology and robotics. On the global economy, most people are acknowledging that we are looking at a global slowdown. The U.S. is best positioned, no doubt about it, given the tax cut plan and the boost to growth that we saw last year. But overall, a year ago, we were talking about a synchronized global growth story. Now we're pretty much talking about a synchronized global slowdown. Some economies worse off than others. But let's not forget, even though China's economy just slowed to 6%, I think any economy in the world would love to see 6% economic growth. So I'm not saying that this is, a catastrophe. Yes, we're coming down from higher levels, but I don't think people are predicting a recession, certainly not this year. China, people want to see a deal done. It looks like both countries really need to see a deal done. I expect something to be agreed upon, particularly China opening up its market, Sandra.
President Trump certainly wants the world to know things are booming here. He's tweeting about manufacturing this morning, among other things. Maria, we'll check back in with you out there in Davos, Switzerland. Thank you.
Thanks, Sandra.
And we have another Fox News alert for you. Bail denied for Paul Whelan. He's the American accused of spying in Russia. As we learn more about what the Russians claim was found in his possession when they arrested him.
Plus, the Senate heading back to work today as the media has rushed to judgment on the BuzzFeed report and the confrontation between those Covington high school students and the Native American protesters comes under scrutiny. White House Deputy Press Secretary Hogan Gidley will join us live to weigh in on all of this in moments.
And we have a Fox News alert. The Senate set to return to work today as Majority Leader Mitch McConnell looks to bring President Trump's proposal to end the shutdown to a vote this week. Both sides continue to point fingers at each other. This morning, the president tweeting this, quote, Democrats are kidding themselves. They don't really believe it. If they say you can stop crime, drugs, human trafficking, and caravans without a wall or steel barrier, stop playing games and give America the security it deserves, a humanitarian crisis. Peter Ducey live on Capitol Hill with what we can expect on the Senate side. Hi, Peter.
Eric, the Senate and the House are both planning to hold votes to end the shutdown this week, but it sounds like the votes are going to be on different things. Mitch McConnell here on the Senate side put President Trump's proposal down on paper, which is basically border wall money in exchange for temporary protections for DACA recipients brought to the country illegally as kids.
So now the task at hand is to go to work on the Senate floor and hammer out this agreement, pass it this week, and get it over to the House.
President Trump posted this morning. Without a wall, our country can never have border or national security. With a powerful wall or steel barrier, crime rates and drugs will go substantially down all over the U.S. The Dems know this, but they want to play political games. Must finally be done correctly. No cave. But the House Democrats want to have a plan that's crafted by House Democrats. That's why Speaker Pelosi wrote this morning. This week, House Democrats will vote on more bipartisan bills to reopen government and act to bolster funding for border security solutions that work. Donald Trump and Senate Majority Leader need to stop holding Americans hostage, stop blocking these bills, and end the shutdown now. Pelosi used the word hostage there, and we've noticed that is language that has now made its way out onto the campaign trail where people who hope to challenge President Trump next fall are starting to show up.
He is now holding the American people hostage over a vanity project that he calls a wall, while 800,000 people are trying to figure out how they're going to pay their rent, how they're going to pay their mortgage. It is completely irresponsible. And those folks don't want a wall, they want a paycheck.
The Senate plans a procedural vote later on today. It would need at least 7 Democrats to defect for it to have 60 and a chance of success. So to gauge the chances of this bill passing or advancing in the procedural stage, watch the Democratic senators from places like Maryland or Virginia, where there are a lot of federal workers among the constituencies. Eric.
And Joe Manchin also. Peter, thank you. Sandra?
For more on the shutdown, let's bring in White House Deputy Press Secretary Hogan Gidley. Hogan, good morning to you.
Good morning.
So the Senate and the House are back in session today. What are the president's expectations for when the Senate takes up his latest proposal?
Well, his expectations are clear. He wants an open government and secure borders. And right now, the Senate looks to move on a bill potentially on Thursday for a vote. We have a humanitarian crisis along our southern border. We have a national security crisis along that border as well. He put forth a common sense plan that used things that the Democrats wanted, included that in the plan, and we want to secure the government. And right now, Democrats refuse to come to the table at all. You just played, or just showed, I should say, a tweet from Nancy Pelosi, and she won't even have a conversation with the president. She was very clear that if we did everything the Democrats wanted, if we voted for every piece they wanted, then they'd talk to us about what we wanted. And when the president put that forward to her as a proposal, fine, I'll open the government and do whatever you want. Will you have a conversation with me about border security? She said one word, no. And that's where we stand right now.
If, and I keep saying this is a big if that Senate accord was to make it through both chambers, does Mitch McConnell have the blessing of the president that he will indeed sign that?
Well, that's a big if. We don't know what the final bill would look like, but the president has been clear about what he wants. That's why we took the initiative and put forth a proposal that was signed off on by so many Democrats, at least pieces of it, of what they wanted. Up to and included, we changed the actual materials that the wall would be made out of. So many Democrats in the past voted for steel barriers. That's why we put the language in there, so that when Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama and Joe Biden and Chuck Schumer all voted for it, they'd be willing to vote for it again. But until this time, there's only really one thing that's changed, and that's Donald Trump is in the White House. They're playing politics with people's lives here. It's dangerous for the country, and there are 800,000 federal workers that by midnight tonight, if a deal is not reached, they are guaranteed to miss a second paycheck in a row. That's unacceptable. Democrats have to come to the table to work with us to fix it.
And we know that Nancy Pelosi has made the suggestion to the president that he should not publicly deliver his State of the Union address next Tuesday. What is going to happen, Hogan?
Well, we have no announcement at this time, but Nancy Pelosi does not dictate to the president when he will or will not have a conversation with the American people. The State of the Union address is set up so the president can explain just what's going on with our government and just what's going on around the globe. The president has an incredible story to tell about how far we've come in this country economically, in a national security capacity. All of those things are impacting Americans positively, and when we have an announcement on that, we'll let you know. But Nancy Pelosi is trying to play politics with that venue.
If she maintains the invitation, which she has not completely taken the invitation off the table, but she has made a suggestion that he does not deliver that on the House floor. What's the president's plan B there? How would he deliver it, or where would he deliver it?
There are many ways he can deliver the State of the Union address. I'm not going to get ahead of anything he would announce. But the fact is, you just pointed out, she has not canceled it. She asked us to postpone it, and she did that without any input from national security. In fact, she even said that Secret Service couldn't protect the speech, which is absolutely ridiculous. If the Secret Service can protect the President of the United States on a trip to Iraq, chances are they can protect the American president in the halls of Congress.
You know, we came to expect those afternoon briefings, press briefings from the White House every day almost. That came to an end. And the last we checked, there has not been one held this year, Hogan. Is there any plans to start that back up again, or see Sarah Sanders back up at the podium?
She's going to come back when she finds a reason to do that, because so often, it's so funny because the media often tell us that when Sarah Sanders stands right behind me at this podium, why can't we hear from the president? We need to hear more from the president. So we put the president out. He speaks to the media every day, and then they say, why can't we hear from Sarah Sanders? It's kind of ridiculous. You can't win for losing half the time. But the fact is, when the president isn't going up, we have a conversation about the message we deliver, and Sarah Sanders will absolutely be back at this podium talking to the press and delivering the message to the American people.
But no definitive date on that.
I'm sorry?
No definitive date yet on that beginning.
No, it's not that they've ever stopped. It's just that sometimes we see a need to come to the podium and communicate things, and sometimes we don't. A lot of times when we don't come to the podium, it's because the president has addressed the American people himself, whether it's on the way to Marine One. I mean, he's the most accessible president in history, and most of the media in this room will tell you that. So it doesn't necessarily mean Sarah Sanders needs to be at this podium every day when the president himself is talking to the American people.
A couple other big items to get to. The latest from Covington, the schools shut down today after this confrontation. The media portrayed it one way. It was discovered that it wasn't the way that played out. The president feels very passionately about this. He's tweeting. It's captivated the attention of the world. He suggested it could end in a dream. Has he reached out to any of those high school students?
Not that I'm aware of at this point, but this whole situation is emblematic of a dangerous situation that does exist here. When the media rushes to get it first and not get it right, this is the type of thing that happens out there. I mean, these children, their lives are completely affected by this and will be for the foreseeable future. The school, as you mentioned, is shut down, has received bomb threats, have received school shooting threats. And it's one of those instances where you look at one piece of video and everyone jumps to one conclusion. And then when you see the entirety of the video, you realize it wasn't exactly what the initial report said. That's dangerous.
So what's the president's thinking on this morning? Have you had a chance to talk to him about it?
I haven't talked to him directly about this, but he's tweeted this again directly to the American people, that this is a situation that's dangerous for those out there because so many in the media, again, jump to get it first and not right. That's something that has to change. You saw that with the BuzzFeed news over the weekend as well. So it's been a rough overall week for the media. When the president says that fake news is the enemy of the people, this is those examples that he points to show that.
I've got to ask you finally about this BuzzFeed report. In the latest on it being shot down by Robert Mueller, we have learned that the president's legal team, Rudy Giuliani, had an exchange with Robert Mueller and his team. What was the extent of the conversations there?
I don't know the extent of the conversation. What I can tell you is what I said on your program actually last week that I was mocked and derided for, that the president hasn't done anything wrong here. And, of course, the facts bear out that. When the special counsel releases a statement and shows the report to be completely false, based on someone who is a convicted felon, defrauded the government out of millions of dollars, and is also a self-admitted liar, you've got a problem when everybody in the country, in the mainstream media, runs with that from morning till night with no corroboration whatsoever, even from the author itself. So that's the situation we find ourselves in. It's dangerous, and it's got to change moving forward.
But obviously there was this exchange. Rudy Giuliani, the legal team of the president, was in communication with Robert Mueller before he debunked the story.
Right, but really for anything further. But the president has maintained the fact he's done nothing wrong here. There's no collusion. We've been in this for 2 years, and I think the American people want this wrapped up. In fact, the majority of them now say that this is seen as a politically motivated witch hunt, and that's a problem.
All right, we're up against a hard break here. Hogan Gidley, we got to a lot. Thank you.
Thanks so much for the time.
Well, that was the White House version of what is happening. Next, we'll talk to the other side and get the view of the shutdown from a Democratic member of Congress. Stay with us.
Court, which the decision right now is to allow the military's ban on transgenders serving in the military to take effect while the issue is still being litigated in the courts. But the justices did refuse a Trump administration request to hear an appeal now on the merits, preferring the issue work its normal way through the appeals court. The Justice Department wanted the justices to bypass the lower courts and decide the issue now. But the news here is that the Supreme Court is going to allow the military's ban on transgenders serving in the military to take effect while these lawsuits continue.
Well, as we have reported, Democratic leaders in the House planning their own vote while continuing to reject the president's proposal to reopen the government. That despite an offer to extend protections for DACA recipients and other immigrants in exchange for the border wall funding. What does this mean? Congressman Dan Kildee joins us of Michigan. He's Chief Deputy Whip and serves in the House Ways and Means Committee. Congressman, good to see you. I mean, as this continues, are you concerned that your party will appear obstinate?
You know, I don't really concern myself, and I don't think anybody should concern themselves with the images or the optics of all of this. This is a really serious set of issues. My view is really clear. We should not use the leverage of a government shutdown to get something that the legislative process itself won't deliver. The framers of our Constitution designed a system that is intended to reconcile the big differences that we face. They never imagined that we would use leverage that really could have an impact, as we're now learning, on public safety and national security in order to get something through the legislative process that otherwise wouldn't result from a deliberate process.
Well,
and I'm very nervous about that. I think this is a bad moment.
Congressman, what about the concerns from some who apparently say that they don't think the Democrats would have good faith if indeed this continued?
I think they should have faith in our system. Our system was designed to reconcile big differences, and we ought to have faith in that system. I understand we've had problems coming to resolution, but let's face it, what the president introduced at the last moment, after a budget compromise was struck and the Senate indicated a willingness to pass legislation to keep government open, was a new element, a new addition beyond what we had already agreed to. We shouldn't stop government from exercising the responsibilities that we've already agreed to fund in order to get leverage to do something that we have not yet come to agreement on. That's the biggest concern that I have about this, is that we seem to have people who have so little faith in our system of government that they're willing to shut the government down in order to get something in exchange for reopening the government and provide the basic elements of a civil society. I think this is a really bad moment for us.
Yeah, and what about the broader issue, a concern the Democrats back in 2006, for example, voted for exactly this offense. Let me show you the vote on that. This was the Secure Offense Act, 2006. Hillary Clinton, Chuck Schumer, Joe Biden, Feinstein, President Obama at the time, Dick Durbin, he's consistent, said no. And yet now you've got 1/3 less of offense that the Democrats oppose.
Well, what we want, obviously, is smart border security. And we have, as you now indicate, clearly we support border security, not just in 2006, but the Senate passed comprehensive immigration reform, which also dealt with border security in 2013. Of course, in both cases, it was the Republicans who refused to bring those pieces of legislation to the floor. But now here we are. How do we get through this? We don't do it by shutting down the government. We have an honest conversation between people of goodwill and try to come to some solution. But we can't solve this obviously very complex set of issues with this shutdown being used as leverage.
Yeah, Congressman, up against a hard break. We'll see what happens. Thank you for joining us.
All right, an update to from the Supreme Court allowing the military's ban on transgenders serving in the military to take effect while this issue is litigated in the courts. We're going to have more on this. Fox News alert: a Moscow judge denying bail for Paul Whelan, the Marine veteran accused of spying in Russia. As his state-appointed lawyer says, Whelan had classified material in his possession when he was arrested. Amy Kellogg is following the story live from Milan, Italy. Amy?
Hi, Sandra. Well, Whelan's lawyer says that he received this flash drive from an unidentified Russian, and he thought that it contained travel tips. The problem is the Russian government is saying that it contained state secrets and that he was caught in an act of espionage. Today in court, Paul Whelan defended his innocence, and he did so from a glass box in that Moscow courtroom. He will have to stay in Lefortovo prison until at least February 26. His lawyer says that they've only had access to 5% of the files in this case. Whelan's family has said he was in Moscow for a wedding. He's a keen traveler and went to Russia a lot. He had taken some of the guests of that wedding around just before he was arrested. According to a Russian media report, Whelan was picked up in his hotel room having just taken possession of a flash drive said to contain a list of employees of an unspecified Russian security department.
On a flash drive, he has received the information, which is a state secret. In reality, Paul was expecting to receive some personal information, which is not a state secret. Information concerning culture, for instance.
Russia has not said which country they believe he was spying for, the U.S., Britain, Canada, or Ireland. Whelan is a citizen of each. The former U.S. Marine who served in Iraq before being convicted of larceny-related charges. Again, protesting his innocence today, his lawyer said he did so with great dignity. However, this is a very tense moment. If found guilty, he could face 20 years in prison. Sandra.
Amy Kellogg, thank you.
Well, it's happening again. Another migrant caravan heading to the U.S. border. Coming up, how Mexico's new open border migration policy is now affecting the influx of people seeking asylum here in our country. Our headliner, Border Patrol Agent Chris Cabrera, will join us in just about half an hour from now. Stay with us.
The U.S. Senate will vote on a bill to reopen the federal government.
Senator McConnell has got an incredible opportunity to bring Schumer and Pelosi to the table to strike a compromise. If Schumer and Pelosi don't take it, then it's on them.
Breaking news about that Catholic school at the center of the confrontation on Capitol Hill. It's now canceled school today.
This has led to a tsunami of hateful messages and threats. Nobody did their research, and it's now showing.
Former FBI lawyer James Baker revealing that he was personally involved in obtaining the FISA warrant to surveil Carter Page.
It is